All right. What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 68 of the Hideout, where we are going to be talking about Web3 gaming and the Metaverse with an awesome panel of guests and their communities. I see a lot of familiar faces in here, but then a lot of new faces. I think we just have one more guest. Nope, it looks like we've got all of our guests on stage, so we are looking good, guys. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Nick Frontera. I am one of the founders and the CEO of Apollo Entertainment, the company behind the Satoshiverse and Legions 2029. I've been in the space since 2017. Before that, I was a lawyer in the entertainment industry and, fell in love with the idea of real ownership of digital assets, and the rest is history. We've been building Satoshiverse since 2020. It started off as a comic collaboration with ourselves and Jose Delvo, who was a 70-year Marvel and DC comic art veteran. And we worked together to establish one of the first Bitcoin superheroes and superhero universes, and then expanded that into an entire gaming ecosystem that we are building, which is led by our flagship IP, Legions 2029. I have posted at the top of the spaces a link where you can kind of see everything about the game if you're not familiar with it. But quickly, from a high level, it is a hybrid between a third-person hack and slash. The combat was inspired by God of War and games like that. So if you enjoy playing that sort of combat style, we have a lot of that incorporated into the game. But then we added RPG elements with a roguelike game loop. So if you've played games like Diablo or World of Warcraft, we have a progression-based system with character progression and item progression that's all stored as NFTs on the blockchain, which enables an open player economy. But then we also have the game loop of a roguelike, which we thought was really cool because they play in a very arcadey way. So you get in, you're playing, it's not as slow as games like Diablo where you have to progress through a whole story. From the minute you play, it gets you right in there. So that's a high level on the game. Definitely check out the post for all the other detailed information. We currently have a mode where you can get in there and create your own avatar, and that will be free to mint once you get to level 5. The game itself is free to play, so you just have to go to either the Hyperplay launcher, for those of you who are familiar with it and want a fully blockchain-enabled experience, or you can go to legions2029.com, and that will allow you to play the game and check out everything. So that's it. That's the quick introduction of Satoshiverse and Legions 2029. Now we are going to get into the meat of our presentation, and we have some really awesome guests today. I'm really excited, kind of from different areas of the metaverse, all doing different things, but all leaders in what they're doing. So this is going to be a super, super interesting spaces. What we'll do is I will call on you guys, and then we can do a quick introduction, kind of tell us a little bit about what you're building, and anything that might be coming up. Feel free to post any kind of visuals to the top of the space. I'm actually going to post I posted the tweet at the top on Legions, but I'm also going to post the tweet for this space itself, just so that we can get some shares out there for those of you who haven't already checked out the space. We do this every week, so real excited to keep this growing. We've been doing it every week for about 1.5 years now. So just sharing thoughts on the metaverse, excited to hear what this awesome panel has to say. And so after introductions, we'll turn to some questions, and then, I'm sure the time will fly by like it always does. So the space is being recorded for those who want to check it out later. But for those who stick around till the end, we're going to have a prize drawing at the end for those who are physically present. So definitely stick around, but if you can't make it the whole time, definitely check out the record version. All right, let's go over to BR1 Infinite, who I was just lucky enough to be a guest on their spaces yesterday. It was an awesome space. I love what you guys are building. Can you guys give us a quick introduction for those who may not know?
What's up, boys and girls? My name is Ryan Ever. In real life, I'm Evan Ryer, and I'm the CEO and co-founder at Bravo Ready, the parent company behind BR1 Infinite. BR1, Bravo Ready 1, our first title. If you're unfamiliar with BR1 Infinite, we are the world's first real money shooter. This is a shooting game where you pay US dollars to spawn and you earn US dollars for every kill. So imagine very similar to like Texas Hold'em poker. There's different tables. In our game, there are different servers. 10-cent game mode, a $1 game mode, a free game mode. Using the $1 game mode as the example, you pay $1 to spawn into this large open world map. And for every player you eliminate, you earn $1 USD. And we keep a percentage of player earnings as a service fee. The game has no timer. There's no start. There's no finish. Again, this is an open world shooter. You spawn in, you just start shooting and looting, eliminating your opponents. And when you die, you could choose to, pay and respawn again or go back to the main menu. It's a true competitive esport. All players have access to the same weapons in their inventory. So you have access to the shotguns, the snipers, the assault rifles. No player has a competitive advantage based on the skins or characters they own. And on the contrary, it's really boils down to what you bring to the table. In our game, we do have NFTs, we have character and weapon skins, and although they are very aesthetic, the other benefit is they provide users an earnings bonus in the game. Basically, by equipping weapons and character skins, we reduce our service fee. You could equip up to 10 weapons and one character to achieve the max earnings bonus, which is about 15%. You could also form teams, rent these assets out to other players. And if you're more of an investor versus a gamer, you could form teams, basically identify athletes with a high kill death ratio, and you pay their entries in their game. So maybe they can't afford to pay the $1 game mode. You pay their entries in the $1 game mode, you split the revenue 50-50. All that and more. Excited to be here. Appreciate you hosting us.
Yeah, it's an awesome concept. I really like this concept as a kind of new use of crypto and Web3 and gaming, that's way harder to do, I think, in the Web2 space. And so really kudos to you guys for building something sustainable, and I'm excited to dive in deeper. All right, let's go to Lucidia, who is founded by one of my artists that I've always really enjoyed in the space, Fuck Render. Let's go over to you guys and let's get an introduction for those who don't know.
Hey, can you guys hear me well?
Yes, sir. All loud and clear.
Wonderful. At first, I thought this space was at the 10 a.m. EST, but it was at 1 p.m. EST, so I'm at the garage now. But it's all good. Yes, so I am Manny, known as Caps Lock Manny. I'm the COO at Lucidia. And as you mentioned, yes, I work alongside Fuck Render. He's the founder of the project. For those who don't know what Lucidia is, if I can give you like a short story of the company, or the project, basically it was founded first as a test or a fun project that Fuck Render wanted to do for himself. So he was thinking, you know what, I'm a 3D artist. I do 3D artworks. But then when I sell that to my collectors, when people collect my art, they basically end up with the 2D JPEG on OpenSea or on Instagram or on their cell phone, whatever the place. The bottom line is that I work in 3D, but it ends up in 2D. That doesn't make sense. So he started learning Unreal Engine himself to build what it was known at the time as Fuck Renderverse. So it's a place where you could go and see Fuck Render artwork in 3D, in real, in a platform that was meant, for his type of art. And then from there, he saw that there was like hype around that, and he said, you know what? Why don't I make it bigger and include other artists, and not just my artwork, but all of the other 3D artists? Why don't I support more artists, basically? Because some of you may know Fuck Render. He's all very, very supportive, right? He's been like in the Web3 space very early on. He's supported other smaller artists to blow up, and he's been always very, very very present in this space. So he rebranded Fuck Renderverse as Lucidia. That's where I joined. Well, I joined the project a little bit before, but that's basically where I started maybe taking more the lead on the project because Fakender has 1,000 other projects, of course. And yes, this is basically where we are today. So we're describing ourselves as a digital art platform. So what does that mean is that we're still building, that space, that virtual museum where you can see artwork. We're still dropping art with artists every month during an era, and we're building also other tools that the artist can use. For instance, a merchandise branch where if you want to create shirts or accessories, well, we have the connections and we have like the processes to support you as an artist, so you don't have to think about that. And same thing with the platform. If you want to drop something, you don't want to deal with the smart contract, you don't want to deal with learning Unreal Engine. Well, it's all good because we have like the team and we have the processes and we have the structure to support those artists. So that leads us basically to where we are today. Yes, a platform that supports digital artists. Yes, that's pretty much it.
I love it. And, it is awesome to see kind of 3D art being experienced in the way that it's meant to be, which is in more immersive ways. And, I think that's only going to increase as we start to see, expansions in VR tech and AR tech. I think what we're doing, I know as a studio, we're experimenting a lot with where 3D experiential experiences can go, where you can experience art in a whole new way. And I'm excited because I know, when you have top creators doing things that are pushing the limits, we're going to be able to blow people's minds pretty soon with what we'll be able to accomplish in 3D that just doesn't quite show itself right now on a screen, right? So I think creating these
Absolutely.
creating these 3D environments is going to be step one, but I think that's very quickly going to grow into some awesome stuff that we can't even think through right now. So really, really excited to have you on and dive into that a bit further. Last, let's jump over to Compete. And I think we have Jablo over there.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for having me. My name is Ethan. I'm the Chief of Operations for Modernized Games, who is building Compete. First and foremost, it's a real privilege to be here, connect with you guys today. Really humbling to share the stage with you guys, awesome builders in the space, and really looking forward to having this conversation. To give you a background as to what we're building, Compete is about 3.5 years into development right now. We're an all-in-one kind of multiplayer game platform. You could think of it kind of simply as the Fortnite or Roblox of Web3 gaming. There are some differences which we can touch on a little bit later, but the bottom line is this: Compete was built around Dastro, who's our founder and CEO. His vision of finally building the game that he and all of his friends had wanted and not gotten over a lifetime of being diehard and then professional gamers. So kind of wrapped into one big vision here. Compete is multiple game modes in one place. So we've got Blitz Royale, we've got kart racing. We're in the middle of building basketball right now, as well as 2 other game modes that we haven't announced yet. We're in early access, so you can jump online, you can play with your friends, you can start earning cosmetics. The focus right now is just on adding the additional platforms that we're targeting, as well as the rollout of our long anticipated game economy. We are fully cross-platform and cross-progression. So right now, if you've got a PC, you could download it from our website, or you could download it on Epic Games. We hope to be on Steam in the future. We're also on Android via the Google Play Store. We'll be adding iOS here pretty shortly. And then PlayStation and hopefully Xbox, the plan is a little bit later this year. So the kind of vision there is that you can pick up your progress on whatever device you want to play on. You can play with your friends regardless of whatever device they own. And really the vision there is to just kind of knock down all those barriers to entry that have stopped people from being able to play their favorite games with their friends in the past. Of course, Web3 is a big part of Compete. It's the tool that we use to allow players, regardless of where in the world they're coming to us from, to own, to buy, to sell game cosmetics and assets with each other. And in this way, they can establish real value as stakeholders in our ecosystem. Important note regarding Web3, it's optional. It's not a requirement to fully play and enjoy Compete. But I do think that, pretty obviously you derive the most benefit and get the most value out of Compete by taking advantage of it. So, we offer the ability that you can truly own anything that you've established a value in our ecosystem, and you can do so on your own timeline. So there's no front end, shoehorning of Web3 to get on the game. There's no NFT to buy in order to play. We're really trying to meet the broader gaming community where they are at, and provide the tools that that we think ultimately they will want, whether or not they understand that when they come in the door. Last thing I wanted to mention about Compete is that we are merit-based. We don't believe in pay to win. Really, the bottom line here is that we want everyone on an equal playing field. So our assets are cosmetic in nature. They're definitely scarcity driven. And the general goal here is that the players who play the most and have the most skill are going to be earning the most exclusive cosmetics in our game economy. And there's a few different ways that we're setting that up. But that's kind of the general vision. So yeah, that's Compete in a nutshell.
Very cool. And, you touched on a lot of, I think, hot topics in the Web3 space. And I think a lot of what you guys are doing aligns with kind of how we're seeing things and thinking about things, especially from a, hybridization where you can, have Web2 gamers and Web3 gamers participate and essentially add additional bonuses for the Web3 gamers. I think that's also going to be important when we look at things like talking about getting on Steam or on PlayStation or Xbox. These are not necessarily super Web3 forward platforms right now, right? And I think they will be someday, but right now it's very hard to launch a Web3 game on any of those consoles or on on Steam. And I think you have to be very careful about how you create the game and develop the game so that you can isolate the Web3 elements for certain platforms because the restrictions currently in place. So I think it's awesome. I definitely will be interested to see the deployment of Compete on those platforms because that will represent, I think, a big step for Web3 gaming as consoles become a bit more crypto forward and allow some of those interactions more natively than the outside interactions that you kind of have to do right now. Let's jump over to Spencer. Spencer, do you want to take us away on our journey into the space?
Sounds good. I can do that. What's going on, everyone? My name is Spencer Vogel. I am the Business Development Manager for Satoshiverse and Apollo Entertainment. Been in the Web3 space since 2017, but working with this team for the last 3 years. So just getting into the format a little bit for today's space, we're going to start off with a question for the group. I'll call on someone to start, and then feel free to just jump into the discussion from there. Then we'll get into some individual questions for each of you guys, and then if we have time at the end, we'll jump back into some group questions. And then Nick mentioned before, but everyone who's here listening live, we're going to be doing a giveaway at the end of the space. So make sure you stick around until the end of the space for a chance to win that. Awesome. So getting into our first question here, and maybe Ryan, you can start us off on this one. So what do you think are some of the biggest challenges with building a Web3 project or brand in today's environment?
Well, I love that. Let's keep it general. Let's keep it fresh. It goes without saying that there is a constant push-pull of whether you're hot or not. And, we could all speak to the early days of 2022 and 2021 when it was very easy to bring VCs into Web3, into gaming. And then all of a sudden, in a post-FTX climate, wasn't cool anymore. It wasn't hot to be investing in Web3 associated products. And with the return of the bull market, now things have changed. And one thing is being able to not only manage this, but surviving the bear market. Surviving in itself is an incredibly strong strategy, something that I tell a lot of the founders that we advise, that sometimes just making it through the bad times is good enough. Historically, a difficulty was helping make the products tangible for the end consumers. At the end of the day, we're all targeting gamers. We're not targeting Web3. Maybe some of us are targeting strictly Web3 consumers. But I think in the general format, when it comes to us building video games, we're all trying to get gamers in here. And the demographic of gamers is one who they have core expectations. And again, historically aligning the product in terms of verbiage and experience was very hard. But now there are a lot of streamlined functions, and a lot of the people on this stage do an incredibly good job of removing the friction around Web3. You know, I'll shout out Compete quickly. You know, boys, I love the way your season pass works, in that you're earning these NFTs, these items, these assets in a Web2 format that I'm going to be able to mint later on and take custody of. It's smart from a technical standpoint. It's smart from a user retention standpoint. It gets me excited to come back to this. Like, it's not a TGE, but it's this catalyst event. And removing the friction from Web3 has maybe been the obstacle, and it'll always be the obstacle, but we're all getting really good at it. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to share.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think that you touched on a bunch of points there, and I think that one of the challenges that a lot of projects, especially in the gaming space, experienced was that, you know, survival mode, right? Resource allocation during the bear, making sure that you're not overspending on certain things that may be, you know, superficial in the early days, right? Focusing more on development than hype, but you know, also I think at some point the kind of what you finished with, it becomes the biggest challenge, right? It's making sure that we're able to reduce the barriers to entry and communicate the value of what we're building, right? Because I think, you know, for example, BR1 has a very unique mechanic, right? So in theory, it doesn't have to be modern warfare. It doesn't have to have a graphics or story quality that competes with the AAA, and it's very difficult, I think, for any of these and any of us indie studios to get to that level. So we have to have kind of a core hook or core mechanic or just a core experience that makes what we're building unique, apart from just the fact that, okay, it's Web3, okay, it's NFTs. And so, you know, for example, with what you guys have built, which is using crypto in an innovative way, I think it could be, you know, what Compete is doing with, you know, having an on-ramp that is very much a hybrid approach. I think our approach is very similar with things like a season pass, which we have coming up. I think the idea of a multiplayer game with aesthetics is tried and true, right? So I think that kind of goes back to, you know, what Ryan was saying about maybe not reinventing the wheel, to, you know, playing to gamers' core expectations, building a good loop, you know, something that will keep gamers coming back, not breaking the game with pay to win mechanics, because I think that's definitely a challenge in this space. We actually, I can talk, I guess, to that point. We wanted to grapple with the idea of how do RPGs survive in a, you know, in a Web3 space? How do you do something more than just aesthetics in a game? And I think that that's very, very difficult to do if you have a multiplayer component. And so what we have is, you know, a single player game where there is an open player economy, but you can pay for progression rather than, you know, and when we say pay, I mean the items have a progression system rather than a, you know, you get this item and now you're stronger than everybody else type of system. I think as soon as you go to multiplayer, you need to have kind of a level playing field for everybody. I think it's too easy, and we've seen too many games screw it up, where, you know, where people are just able to buy their way to the top, and that's no fun. But yeah, Ryan, you have your hand up, and then we'll go to the others as well.
I changed my mind. I believe that the biggest obstacle was player liquidity. When you build multiplayer video games, especially shooting games, you have to have enough players, right? The critical threshold of participation. So when a new user shows up, there's enough people for them to play with, and that's definitely the hardest part of building any video game, Web3 or Web2, and especially doing it without bots. And I am really proud to say we've never had bots in BR1 Infinite, and it's exciting to build a small cult that is a snowball of momentum that ultimately, you know, turns into this very large thing that you can't even recognize. But yeah, player liquidity. I think that was the hardest obstacle to overcome.
Go ahead, Ethan.
Yeah, well, first of all, I certainly agree. It is definitely one of the hardest problems, and I think from the perspective of the community, it's maybe even a little bit harder to understand than from the perspective of a developer. So when we're setting up our lobbies, compete, we've got 30 players to fill a lobby, and games are about 10 minutes long. So run in a little bit of quick math. It's maybe 100 to 150 players that need to be online at any given time to have no bots in the game. And so when you're building a game that's in early access and you're not ready to totally roll out and go to market, it does make it challenging for sure. So I agree. One other thing that I wanted to mention, I heard just now the description of push pull in Web3, and I think that's a really good way to describe the challenge here. And again, I think it comes from the perspective of the community being pushed and pulled, as well as the builders of these experiences. So with Web3, I think there's an initial focus from the community that's built around profit potential. How quickly can I make, the most value possible, or the most money possible, or get the most for myself? And I think that inherently makes sense, right? Especially with the idea that Web3 and gaming is kind of new. Players haven't had the chance to experience it before. They're going to be the people that are drawn to those features are going to want to fully get the most out of those features. The challenge with that is that in order to build a good game, these things take time. They take years, not months. And as I'm sure everyone listening to this space knows, the Web3 space, it moves, it moves a mile a minute, right? There's a new shiny object to chase pretty much as often as you refresh your Twitter feed. So I think one thing that we've really found is that you have to build your community to kind of believe in the core vision of what you're doing. You can't be willing to compromise on your product quality or the integrity or longevity of your game economy to make false promises or to extract value that just hasn't been established yet. And so I think that push and that pull of how do you keep people engaged? How do you keep them interested in what you're doing? How do you keep those lobbies full? That player liquidity. It really takes building out in the open. It takes having your community understand what you're doing and what you're trying to build, bringing them along for the ride, and really integrating them into that process. And like you just said, you've got a smaller but core and diehard group that sees what you're doing and is willing to follow along and is excited to be part of that journey. And I think that you don't necessarily get that in the space outside of Web3. So, in some senses, being a Web3 game makes it harder. But on the other sense, I think there is the unique opportunity in Web3 to find individuals that are really, willing to see a long-term vision and to follow you through the whole process of getting there. So it's really an interesting space in that sense.
Lucidia, do you guys got anything to add until we or before we move on to individual questions?
Yeah, it's funny because we're not really into gaming, so I see that they're different and some things that are similar. The way I see this question, I'm gonna think about maybe the learnings that I had in the past few, I would say, months and years, because we've been around for a little bit, I think the two things I have in mind is, and it's gonna sound very, very dumb, but if you want to start a Web3 project like tomorrow morning, one of the thing, it's gonna sound very stupid, but think about the business model. It's stupid, but most of that hype that happened in the last few years, what you would see is people drop 10,000 PFP projects. You made a huge amount of money in a short time, and then you have to build the utility. And then when you run out of money, you have to drop another collection of NFT to kind of finish building the utility. And it becomes a little bit something like Ponzi-esque a little bit. You need to always drop more stuff to build on the stuff that you promised in the past. And I don't think that's very sustainable because, like, first of all, you're always stuck with the same kind of like community. You're always stuck in the same, I would say, space. You're always talking to people that only understand and knows and love Web3. So I don't know. It feels like this is, yeah. It sounds a little bit stupid, but like if you're thinking about just dropping something that is limited to Web3, it might be a little bit hard, just because it's a little market. It is a market, but it's not like your mother and your father and my grandfather market. It's not. You're limited to a certain yeah, age and you could even say a certain sex even. So that's one big learning, I would say, that yeah, making Web3 your sole kind of like the core of your business model, I think it's putting a lot of all your eggs in one basket, basically. So I think you have to think of Web3 as a tool. Like, how can you use that? You have to answer. You have to ask the question like, could I do this project without Web3? Would it work? And if the answer is yes, maybe you don't even need Web3. So you have to make sure that if you have Web3 in your project, it's because it makes absolutely sense and it is core to the business model you're trying to develop. And that makes sense with gaming. Like, you want to have your user to possess the thing they want to use every day when they play with their friends. And same thing with our project, where if you want to you want to own artwork from digital artists, they cannot print a 3D. Well, they could do a sculpture, but I mean, if you want to just own like the video that is outputted from the artist, yeah, it has to be on the blockchain, right? So I would say that's the first thing, and the second thing I would say that is it's maybe more long term, but by the nature of the space where everything is kind of like boosted by dopamine, and people are like, oh, this is the next, that's the next thing, that's the next project, and then there's the bull run, and so everything is kind of like driven. The space is really driven by passionate people, like people who like really like the tech and really like being in the space. But what does that mean is it creates also a space where people easily jump from one hype project to another. So one thing that is kind of, I think, hard, and I think people who wants to jump into Web3 have to consider, is that, yeah, it's a bit different than starting a standard company where, like, yeah, people are just like very, very excited about projects here. So if you're not like relevant and you're not doing anything, it's just the nature of the space where newer project will always get more hype than older projects. And it's not, of course, all the time like that, but I would say it's a trend, I would say. So yeah, you have to have good nerves, I would say. And it's not, by the way, I might sound a little bit negative here, but I'm absolutely positive about the tech, and I'm absolutely positive about what we're doing. I'm just trying to paint maybe a more realistic, I would say, picture for those who would be interested in launching their own Web3 project. It's just, these are also like two sides of the same coin, right? So yeah, I hope that answers the question a little bit.
The question is by nature negative and asking about challenges, so no worries. Ryan, I saw you had your hand up before. Did you have something?
I was just curious, Lucidia, where in Montreal are you from?
Oh, I was born on the south shore of Montreal, Saint-Jean-sur-Richelieu. Are you familiar with Quebec?
Brother, I know a man of Quebec when I hear one. Our office is here in Montreal in St. Henry.
Nice. Yeah. Nice to meet you, man. You should grab a drink.
We'll save it for another time. Satoshi, what's our next set of topics?
Well, I'm throwing it right back to you for your individual question. So here you go. So BR1, you talked about this a little bit before, has a pay to spawn, kill to earn mechanic. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about why you believe that earning component specifically is so important for Web3 gaming.
So growing up in an era of rugged, growing up in the era of games that didn't have Web3, where I was getting banned left, right, and center for farming gold or items in games like RuneScape. Obviously, I'm incredibly motivated to deliver games that have provably fair, provably scarce assets that provide tangible value for the time you spend in them. And that's the key statement: tangible value for the time you spend in these games. Video games to me, I'm turned 30 the other week. Video games to me were kind of like a toxic ex-girlfriend. I love them and I love to play them, but they come at a huge trade-off, both financially, how I spend my social time with my friends, with my family, my other hobbies. The point is, there was no tangible reward. Prior to BR1 Infinite, I had an esports wagering and tournament website called compete.gg that I sold to a public company called React Gaming. And my hypothesis then was an aging demographic is looking for an additional level of thrill in their everyday gameplay. Once you start playing cards for money or betting on sports, you never really get that same dopamine rush unless you always have money on the line. And I think the overlap of real money in video games was inevitable. In the pursuit of, after I sold my other company, in the pursuit of delivering on this dream, I explored a handful of different dynamics. I looked at doing this with cash, monetary transmission, gambling, compliance. These are all things I'm very familiar with and had resources in. Nonetheless, we started to look down crypto, and the first version of the game was one with Bitcoin-based payments and Ethereum-based characters. Wow, you can only imagine, just wow, what a concept. And as we went further and further into our journey, we discovered a handful of other chains and ultimately settled to build our MVP on Solana. And now BR1 Infinite exists in a format where it is fairly chain agnostic. To play the game, you just go to our website, email, password, download, play, and any Web2 user could show up, hop in. The verbiage is totally aligned with our expectation. There's no mention of crypto or NFTs, but you could deposit and play however you want. Pay to spawn, kill to earn is the most tangible way to describe the experience that you have when playing BR1 Infinite or any of our games. All the games we produce have this pay to spawn, kill to earn mechanic. It's not play to earn. It's not win to earn, although we own that trademark also. It's pay to spawn, put up a bit of money, risk it for the biscuit to kill to earn. And what separates winning and losing in this game is, again, that skill that you have, what you bring to the table.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, that's a great perspective on it. I mean, I think a lot of games, at least in the past, I think at this point games are starting to change their tune a little bit in the past, that definitely was that's what everybody was doing. It was play to earn. So yeah, I appreciate your perspective on it and the way that you guys are approaching it. So moving on to our next individual question here is going to go to Manny. So how do you think Web3 platforms and tooling can empower digital artists and their collectors?
Yeah, that's a good question. The story of Lucidia is very tightly, it's tied with the Fakrender story, of course. So the example I can give it's the best one is when Fakrender, before he started doing anything in the Web3 world or selling his artwork using NFT in Web3, he was kind of like stuck in the loop where he had to, get his own clients and do commission work. And then he was kind of like, there was no progression, right? It was not really considered, and that's his own words, right? He told me once that he didn't feel like he was an artist. He was more like some sort of like technician that would be at the end of the line and just produce something that a brand would need. And what this allowed him to do is basically to be, to kind of like legit, make everything more legit. Like, yes, I am an artist. I can say that I'm an artist. I can live off my art now because of the blockchain. He can sell his own artwork. He's making the money. He's not doing, he's not going through any third party or whatever. So I think this is very powerful when you think about it. It's like this enables, a new generation of artists, like 3D artists, even 2D, even people that are more like, not using like C4D, just like using Photoshop, like, or even AI, people that works like on digital canvases, even if it's not in 3D. I think it enables like this new generation of artists that can finally, see themselves as artists and live off their art. And I think Lucidia is basically built on top of that. That's kind of like our mission. When we had like to write down the mission of the brand, it was really like, yeah, what we want to do is, to support meaningful artists, because these artists have the power to influence culture and influence generation and change societies, and let's give them all the tools that they need to to have them focus on what they do best, and even maybe have them explore things that they couldn't. We work with Magda Jones, and it's funny because he was in the crowd a few minutes ago. But when we work with Magda Jones, okay, he's not a small artist, right? But still, there was a way for us to help him where he didn't do any. He's not working in 3D at all. So when we work with him, we're like, okay, so we have tech artists that we could provide if you want uh, to develop a 3D helmet, because like he's always working in 2D with his helmets. And I remember that when we had meetings with him, it was like kind of like a revelation. It was like, wow, this is like, this opens new doors. It's like a new world. It's like something I never thought about, and I never, so yeah, it's just another little example. I would say that, blockchain helps smaller artists, and for us, that's what we want to do. And it can help also bigger artists, and it can, yeah, Lucia just want to provide those tools. It's not just Web3. It's everything else that is around. Yeah, so that's how we see it. I would say, or at least how I see it. Yeah.
Yeah, so we very much have a similar perspective over here. Starting with Jose Delbo, and what we did to help manage his NFT and Web3 career. I mean, he was a relatively well known comic book artist in the physical space, but we were able to help bring his work to the physical or to the digital space, and even bring it to 3D. So we definitely get everything that you guys are working on, and are excited to see how you guys continue with it. So our last final question for individuals are, so Ethan, so Compete has numerous multiplayer game modes you talked about before. So you have Blitz Royale, Kart Race, and a few others that are on the way. So what do you think are the advantages of having a multi-game ecosystem compared to just focusing on building out features for just one single game?
Yeah, this is such a good question. From a gameplay standpoint, I think just circling back to what I had mentioned earlier, the whole multi-game ecosystem is really one of the core tenets of our vision for Compete. So in reality, I think most players are drawn to playing different games. Burnout on a single game mode can happen pretty easily. And the most successful games of the last decade have really all been more so gaming platforms. I mentioned earlier Fortnite, Roblox, Minecraft. These are all good examples. We're slightly different in that the titles for our game platform are games that are created by us. They're not user generated. But I think, in principle, the concept and therefore the attraction is kind of the same. So basically, the vision is when you jump online with your friends, you want to hop into the BR, then maybe you go race some karts, you finish up with a few rounds of social deduction. From a development standpoint, I think inherently, the first thought is, hey, building a game is really hard. Why would you want to build 2 games or 3 games instead of just polishing one up and making it perfect? Especially for a smaller team like Modernized Games. We're a studio of about 25 or 30 developers. And so there's no doubt that committing to multiple game modes is really ambitious. But we do look at things a little bit differently. And what it comes down to is being able to fully juice the squeeze, you could think of it as, when it comes to the work that we do each day. So in reality, if we were to build out a separate game, a standalone game for Blitz Royale, a different game for kart racing, a different game for social deduction, a pretty big percentage of the work that we'd need to do would end up being the exact same for each of those 3 games. Put another way, we're able to double dip on a lot of the work that we do each day. So a few examples, our driving mechanics from kart racing, we just integrated into our Blitz Royale pretty easily. We use the Blitz Royale locomotion and shooting mechanics in our social deduction. Mizuku Island, which is our map and kind of the home of all of our game modes. The whole island in and of itself is our BR map. The kart racing tracks are integrated. Social deduction takes place at specific points of interest. Everything from the networking to the matchmaking, XP progression systems, cosmetics, interfaces, settings, crossplay, etc. The list goes on, even into stuff like legal and marketing. All of these are totally able to be shared between multiple game modes. And so our thought process is kind of, if we can reuse them, why wouldn't we? So from an economic standpoint, and I think this is especially important when you consider Web3, when you earn stuff playing Compete, we want there to be real value in that. And without needing to look really too deep, the first thing to understand is that when you value something, you want to be able to use your stuff as much as possible. And so, there's this kind of underlying idea in Web3 of interoperability, the dream of the metaverse with stories like Ready Player One. And I think there's no doubt, I would guess, in anyone that's listening right now, why that's attractive, right? And it's this idea of being able to use the things that you value in a bigger, broader ecosystem. So, players who value their game assets want to use them. And people who have their Compete assets, we want them to be able to use them, whether it's a kart racing kind of day, a BR kind of day, maybe a day to just get in a few rounds of social deduction. We're looking to incorporate less competitive, more hangout experiences in the future for Compete. So that's the general idea of why we're drawn to this idea of a multi-game ecosystem from that economic standpoint. Lastly, just from a marketing standpoint, with gaming, scalability is everything. There's on the front end, there's that minimum viable player liquidity that we mentioned. You need X number of players to get the game rolling. And ultimately, the pursuit here is of market share, in the bigger, broader global marketplace of gaming. So what we've done is we've targeted some of the most popular gaming modes in the history of gaming. And none of the game modes that we offer have that unique combination right now of free to play, no pay to win, cross-platform, cross-play, Web3 enabled. If you're a gamer out there right now and you want to play, any of the game modes that we offer, none of them are currently currently offered in that particular configuration. So, for many players, just one of those game modes will be enough of a draw. But I think there is a whole bigger subset of gamers out there who maybe they don't want to sink all of their time into, just into the BR or just into the kart race, but they want to, again, fully derive value and be able to have a stake in what they're doing more broadly. And so, knowing that the metaverse, in the way that Ready Player One painted it up to be in the story, is not on the 1 or the 2 year horizon. Having this multi-game kind of gaming platform vision is kind of what we see as a good stepping stone to get there. One last thing I'll mention is similar to social media. There's this network effect idea. And the general idea is that, as the size of your ecosystem grows, the network effect adds value to each of those network participants. So if our game grows because the BR grows, so too does our kart racing ecosystem that rides along with it. And so, that's kind of the general idea for why we're pursuing what we are with this multi-game ecosystem. And yeah, we're excited about it. It's been obviously a little bit more work than if we had just focused on one game mode or the other, but being that we're kind of an iterative build in public type of studio, it's worked really well for us. We can gauge what features are popular, what game modes are working out well, and we can double down on what works, and we can move forward from stuff that doesn't. So there's more flexibility in the strategy than I think might be initially obvious.
It makes a ton of sense, and I'm really glad that you brought up interoperability, because that transitions very well into our next question here. And Nick, I think I'm going to put you on the spot for this one first. What advancements do you think are needed to achieve true cross-platform interoperability in the Web3 industry?
Yeah, thanks, Spencer. So luckily, I just spoke on this topic at NFT NYC, and it was a really good discussion. And sometimes we have these discussions, and gosh, it feels like we've been talking about interoperability for the last 4 years. But there have been real improvements, I think, in the tech that will allow eventually for us to have that Ready Player One style interoperability. And I'll leave it to the rest of the panel to kind of talk in more detail about kind of the obvious stuff, right? The stuff that that we're gonna see coming from an interop. Sorry, I tongue tied. So what I'm going to focus on is the infrastructure. I think what I would say here is that there's a couple different layers when we talk about interoperability that you can focus on in Web3, and each of those layers has problems currently, but also opportunities because of Web3. So obviously you have kind of the wallet layer, which is kind of the ownership and authentication layer. That, when we're looking at that, we're looking at developing tooling so that we can do lookups from different types of gaming experiences to ensure that an owner owns an NFT, and then that can then be fed back to the game. That's pretty much there on most platforms. The tooling is pretty much there to be able to call different blockchains and see, okay, this person owns this NFT. It's still a little bit tough with certain blockchains. You got to kind of set up a system. If you go outside of the EVM ecosystem, you have to have a different system to make those calls, but they all work pretty much the same. So that I think has been the first problem that was tackled, and maybe was the easiest one to tackle. I think the second advancements will need to come on the asset layer, right? And I think this is one of the really tough ones. I think that what we see is, obviously we're building in all different types of engines. Some of us are building in Unreal, some are on Unity, some are building mobile games, some are building PC games, some are building browser games. Everyone is going to have its own requirements, polygon limitations, the whole 9 yards in terms of what an asset needs to be even usable in a different environment, right? So what we need to do, I think, is establish standards for these different types of experiences. We need to start, working as a community on, okay, if we're going to create avatars, we're going to create them in a certain way or through a certain pipeline that's going to allow iterations of them to be used in different environments. And I think what we've seen probably over the last year and a half is a real advancement in tooling so that if something is at least close to the standard, it can be, retargeted in a way that's done automatically so that it will work in other, environments. But, for example, we did a linked wearables collection with Decentraland about a year and a half ago, or a year ago. I'm not sure when it was, but it was the first time they had done something like that. And it was really cool because we were able to take our avatars, which were, high fidelity, made for an Unreal Engine game, and represent a form of them, different forms of them, depending on in this low poly world in a browser-based experience through a wearable. But there wasn't like a separate NFT for the wearable. It was linked to the Legionnaire NFT. And so while we thought that was a big step forward and something really interesting for the time, there was a ton of work and a ton of collaboration required for us to do that. And that was, more of the beginnings of a partnership than it was true interoperability. But it was a step forward. What we need, I think, is to expand that sort of infrastructure out so that, you look at companies like Ready Player Me or Emergence, who are building kind of these avatar standards. And I think those are going to become progressively more and more used in different experiences so we can have some at least aesthetic interoperability. I think once you go to actual integration within games beyond aesthetics, I think we're talking at that point several years in the future. But I guess the last layer, which is the one that interests me the most and is the reason I got into Web3 as a lawyer all those years ago, is that what we could see is a legal infrastructure layer for interoperability. And what I mean by that, very simply put, is that right now, if you're going to have an asset that can be used in more than one place, and there's any sort of IP ownership involved, right? Let's say, I want my assets to be usable in another platform. I have to have a direct link to that platform. I need to go to that platform and say, hey, we're going to validate our use from an IP perspective. It can be used in this platform, and that platform needs to have a right to display those assets in that platform. And the reason for that is because prior to NFTs, there was no way to convey anything less than a limited license to display the IP in a particular environment. So what happened? You had a lot of limited licenses to display the IP in their environment. So if you have a skin in Diablo, you have a limited license to display that skin or item in the Diablo game. Maybe, it could be carried to another Blizzard product, but that's all because they own the IP. What NFTs do is they create this tangibilization layer and the potential for a lot of the infrastructure that we currently have in the physical world, for physical items with IP on them, to then be extended into the digital world. And what that could allow us to do, again, is to have legal standards rather than have everything be controlled by contractual arrangements between two parties. And that, to me, is going to be low key one of the biggest things I think NFTs are going to enable, is actual legal infrastructure around digital assets that can be extended across platforms and serve as a baseline, so that developers, when they are selling, something, you already know, oh, I have the rights to use this in all these different, platforms that converge, and conform to the standards. And I think that's going to be very significant. But I'll shut up because I know we're getting real low on time.
Yeah, Ethan, go ahead.
Yeah, just a couple of things I wanted to kind of touch on here. First and foremost, I want to nerd out on the legal side of things real quick. So glad you acknowledged that. Until you've tried to put together a terms of service or IP agreements, I don't think it's possible to fully understand the stickiness that is involved with trying to deal with the idea of interoperability. I don't think it's impossible. I think someone's going to make a lot of money doing it well, but it's definitely a hurdle. The second thing I also wanted to just acknowledge was that there's a definite kind of standard protocol that needs to be created if you want to take assets from one game and try to put them into another one. Just an example, and I'll piggyback this two different ways. I was just playing Elden Ring recently. Totally blew my mind. Beautiful, immersive. If you tried to take a lot of the assets that were in Elden Ring and you tried to put them into Compete so that they worked on a mobile phone, it would take quite a bit of work. And I'm not sure they would look the same at the end of it. Kind of, moving off of that idea, but along the same lines, I think that in some senses, the idea of interoperability is a little bit self-defeating, in a sense. And when I say that, I don't want to sound like a doomer on interoperability or anything, but just stick with me here for a second. What becomes of a game that is immersive and set in a place like the Middle Ages or like Elden Ring, when I want to import my futuristic alien gun or my futuristic clothing? Style and art form matter for immersive experiences. And I think at some point the all-in-one, all is allowed in concept kind of dilutes a lot of the original aesthetic that makes gaming so valuable. So, one thing I want to kind of throw out there that's a little bit of a different angle on this interoperability idea is an opportunity that I credit to Web3 specifically. Give you a little bit of a story. So at one point, I played a game called RuneScape. I probably put, I don't know how many thousand hours in there, way too many to admit publicly. I had accrued a ton of value in that game. At some point, maybe 2/3 of the way through my journey in that game, I stopped enjoying it. But I couldn't get myself to leave because nothing I had earned could come with me. I wanted to go play Halo with my friends, but the party hats I had earned weren't going to show up in the Halo matchmaking lobbies. And I think Web3 has the opportunity to solve this dilemma, which is, I think, the dilemma that a lot of people ultimately feel interoperability is what's going to solve. In that, if I could have pulled value out of that RuneScape experience because I owned those assets, I could extract the value that I had accrued there, and I could have pushed that value into a separate ecosystem like Halo. My desire to try to bring the party hat over to Halo would have kind of lost its meaning. It wasn't that I literally wanted the paper hat on my head while I was playing. I wanted the value that I was leaving behind to go do something else to come with me. And I think that a big draw for a lot of people on interoperability is that sunk cost fallacy, and how do we avoid it? And so I think, we kind of are looking at the answer right here with Web3, at least in the digital space of, hey, you can own these digital things that you've accrued, in your journey of gaming. You can hold them for what they're worth. You can choose to value them enough to continue owning them, or you could choose to value something in a different ecosystem enough that you let those ones in the prior ecosystem go. And I think that having that openness to kind of jump from one experience to the next solves a lot of what interoperability is trying to solve, without needing to do the hurdles of how do we take the Elden Ring assets and put them into a mobile friendly compete game. And so I think hopefully we'll start to see some recognition of that. And I think it's a more realistic path forward. So I just wanted to throw that out there as kind of an alternative perspective.
I'm sure we could talk about this forever, and if you guys want to jump into the conversation, feel free. But I think, interest of time, we might jump on and announce our winner of our giveaway here. So the winner of our giveaway today is, sorry, pulling it up. The winner of our giveaway is Crimson Caravan Company at Crimson Caravan. Congratulations, Crimson Caravan. Please, so I guess, Nick, I'll let you. I think you're better at explaining the claiming instructions for the Satoshi's crystals. So I'll let you go ahead and do that.
Sure. Yeah. So Satoshi's crystals, real quick, are the key ERC 1155 resource in our game. It's basically used to do everything for crafting. It's also what our Legionnaires and Eighth Level Army avatars passively earn. Very important resource in the game once you jump in. All you got to do to claim them is create a Legion's 2029 account, and we will add them to your account. Just create the account and DM us with the name of the account that you have created, and we will add them. And then you can either use them in the game, or you can mint them as NFTs and sell them on the open market. But they are an important resource within the game, so definitely make sure you claim those, and congratulations.
Well, Nick, I'll let you close this out then.
Yeah, for sure. Guys, this has been an amazing space. As always, really great insights, projects that are building awesome things within the space. I really hope that we can all continue on this journey together and collaborate in different ways, especially as different projects. I think everyone here is building high fidelity experiences, and I think it's great when we can kind of make things happen. So please do feel free to reach out. We'd love to have you back on in the future when you've got something big coming, or even if just to get back on and have great conversation like today. And thank you to everybody who joined and everybody who will be watching the recorded spaces later on. If you enjoyed this, we'll be doing it again next week with new guests. So please do check back. But otherwise, this has been really great. Thank you all so much. I'll let you guys, if you want, have a couple minutes to, if you have anything coming up, or if you want to pin anything to the spaces, or say anything about what's coming. Otherwise, if I hear silence and crickets, I will close the space. There's a slight delay between the speakers and the listeners. So I will make sure to close it once I get the all clear that everybody has heard everything. But anyways, let's jump over. Yeah, Lucidia, go ahead.
Yeah, so we have on our side an exciting announcement. We've been working on, our digital art platform for over a year now. We launched the alpha version 2 months ago, and we will be launching our beta version in 2 weeks. And we're going to be able to open this beta to more communities. So I'm looking at the speakers here on this stage. If any projects that hears my message right now as a NFT collection that we can use on the token gating of our website, you could have early access to our new and improved Unreal Engine 5 Lucidia platform. So that's the news will be announced on our Twitter, but yeah, maybe we're gonna see some of you soon inside Lucidia.
I love it. We'll definitely be sending over a DM. Go ahead, Jablo.
Yeah, I'm going to try to be real quick here. First, thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate it. Thanks to all the other speakers that were up here today. It feels really good to share the stage with you guys. So keep at it and keep building. It's really exciting to watch, and we're certainly supporting you over at Compete. If you're interested in what we're doing right now, a lot of our focus is on rolling out our game economy. So this is long awaited. Our community has been anxiously anticipating it for quite some time, and all the pieces are finally coming together. So hoping that later this week we will be rolling out our convert feature. This is kind of the secret sauce, if you will, that allows people to go from Web 2 to Web 3 at their own speed and on their own timeline. So if you want to start playing Compete and earning cosmetics, that's been a possibility for, I don't know, the last 4 or 5 months. But coming up real soon here, you're going to be able to actually convert those into tradable NFTs. And then, of course, our marketplace, which we call the Bazaar, will be followed behind not long after. So it's a perfect time to come check us out if you haven't already. And yeah, thanks again for having me.
I love it. Well, thank you all so much again. I'm going to wrap up the spaces now, but thanks so much. And we will see everybody next week for another episode.